You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's going on? Hope you're well, and thank you so much for checking out my show, Straight to Video. As always, I'm Rob Lane, and I'm thrilled to bring you a talk on this week's show with a brand new musician who I've been listening to actually non-stop for the past few weeks. In today's world, and as I get older, it's tough to find new bands or artists making music that really hits home and excites you, but within seconds of hearing Torturetwinn's latest single, Apologies, I knew there was something special going on. There's really something magical in the songs and melodies of Torturetwinn and how they're created. It's familiar sounding, but has such a wide spectrum of influences, it immediately becomes its own thing, and the more you listen, the more you become hooked and invested. Once again though, I was proved just how small this world is these days, as upon further deep diving, I discovered Torturetwinn were just about to head out on tour with our friends Kelsey Carter and the Heroines all across the USA. I chatted about this with Andrew Devin, who is the mastermind behind Torturetwinn, along with so much cool stuff. From his love of 80s pop and hard rock to what led him to leaving his job to pursue music full-time and much, much more. This one really is a good one and I hope you enjoy it. You can find Andrew and Torturetwinn on all social media platforms where he's constantly posting really cool stuff, or head on over to torturetwinn.com. That's 2 N's in Torturetwinn. But right now, please enjoy my straight-to-video chat with Andrew Devin of Torturetwinn.
What's up, my friend?
Doing it. How's it going, man?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, great to see you. How's your day going? All right?
Yeah, it's been good, man. Just been getting back into the swing of everything here. So, post-tour, it's always a weird come down. And then, your health is like, my body can finally fail because it's been on the road and you've been pushing it for 3 weeks straight. So, yeah, I've been like dealing with all the respiratory stuff and whatever now.
How much weight did you lose on tour?
Dude, no, for real. Like, it was probably close to 5 to 10 pounds in that time frame.
You eat like crap pizza at like 2 a.m. every day and you lose weight.
There was one day, one of my guys had made a comment, like kind of jokingly being like, Andrew, I don't think you've eaten a meal in 2 days. And I was like, have I? You really lose all track of normality while you're out there. It's crazy.
How was you getting around on tour? Was you in a van?
Yeah, so we've been doing what a lot of people here in like the US do, which is just like to rent a van through Enterprise. So you pay, a couple grand for a van, but I've been getting pretty lucky. Like you get this 12 passenger, like 2026 Mercedes Sprinter van. Pretty nice deal. You can like lay back in the seats, in the back. So we've done that on the last 2 runs, which has been pretty nice. So
thank you for doing this.
Pleasure, man. Of course.
Congrats on the airplay of the new single Apologies on Kerrang Radio this week. That must be pretty exciting for you. Do you know how you got on their radar? Because on that little clip you shared, Alex Baker, he was like buzzing about your songs.
So it goes back to Kelsey Carter and the Heroines. Their drummer, Sebastian, the day after tour, after we'd left, he just sent me 3 profiles on Instagram and my messages. And I was like, I didn't know what it was. So I was like, yo, are these like your mates or something? Like, why'd you send me these? And he's like, oh, I forgot to tell you. There are 3 radio DJs in the UK. He's like, they basically control the airways. And he's like, you should try and like talk to them, connect, whatever. So I followed all 3 accounts, hadn't even sent a message yet. And I get a message from Alex like very, very soon after, just being like, hey man, send me a WAV file of Apologies. I want to play it on my station. This was like within moments. And I was like, what happened here? I was like, did I message him and forget? So yeah, he threw it on and he emailed me back and he was like, had told me, he was like, you're going to be my featured artist of the week, just so you know. And yeah, so I tuned in and I didn't know what to expect. I thought he'd be like, hey, Torturetwinn, Apologies, featured artist of the week, check him out. And then the guy goes on like quite literally the nicest rant anyone has ever had about me before. And I was just sitting there like, I'll film it so I can remember this. And I was just like, man, now I'm trying not to like cry filming myself because this guy's just saying like legend. It was such a cool moment for sure.
Do you have any distinct memories of hearing any particular songs for the first time on air when you were growing up and being blown away?
Oh man, yeah. It's funny. So one of my songs is called Remember Me. And the opening line is, I used to listen to the radio, everybody wants to rule the world. And when I was a kid, it's probably my earliest memory to date, but when I was a kid living in this townhouse, my dad every weekend would be making breakfast in the kitchen. and he'd always turn the radio on. And so, I would come down the stairs, I'd hear the music on, and it was like this cool, it always happened every weekend. And I remember specifically one weekend coming down the stairs, and it was like springtime, the back door is open with the screen door, and I hear the radio and I just hear that riff, that opening riff, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And it took me years to figure out what it was down the line.
No Shazam back then.
No, and I was a kid, man. I was a little kid. So like it was Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And I like have that memory. And it was probably one of those moments where you don't realize when you're a kid, how you're soaking everything up. And musically for me, I was already like in the throes of becoming a musician at that young age. But I feel like that was probably the first 80s song that like planted a seed in my head. And it took me a long time to like put those pieces together and apply it to like my own musical writing. But it was definitely that song.
In my opinion, it's the best middle eight ever.
Oh, yeah.
It just lifts. It's just magic, that middle eight in that song. It's like, damn.
It's really funny. Yesterday, I was kind of dissecting it. So what I did was I went on YouTube. Everybody isolates all these tracks now. You can do, these deep dives. And so I was pulling into my sessions. I was like, I want to see what the isolated drums are and the isolated bass. It's like, it's the easiest sounding song. And then you go to play it and you hear all the parts and how they work together. It's seriously one of the greatest songs of all time. And it's not an easy song. It's not like, it's very sophisticated.
Are you a fan of their other stuff as well? Did you become a Tears for Fears fan?
I think the way I was getting into 80s music, and really in general, the way that I consumed like that 80s pop rock, new wave, like, and what have you, I was always like a singles kid. I got into the singles and then I would ride a single forever. And this isn't the case for all artists of that time. But you did find that a lot of those artists would have like these big singles on records, and then some songs might not be as, lifted as those singles. So I did get into them. I gave them obviously like you hear one song and you're like, I got to know what else is out there. Their tone was always just like, was phenomenal. What I loved about them was the vocals were so strong but soft. And so for me, in my realm, that like kind of gave me what I felt like my voice was, which was like, I can be strong, but I don't have like the guttural aspect that I wanted. So like being able to be soft but strong and have range, that was definitely something I picked up from like Tears for Fears.
Well, I have Spotify to thank for first hearing you, because I was listening to a new album by a band I really like called Vent 414, and I was just doing some work. That album finished, and then Apologies by You came straight on, and I was like, wow, what is this? It sounds like modern English, Melt With You or something like that. I was like, so I had to check it out. What's the story with the latest single? Is it part of recordings for the new album? Because I think I saw you mention it was actually, is it an older song which you've like resurrected?
The way I've been kind of going at music for the last year was after I put out my first record, which was Blood Love. That was kind of like what set the tone. I had already known the songs. I brought it into the main studio here. And after that, I was like, well, I just want to keep releasing music because I've made this my life now. This is all I do. So I was like, I just want to keep putting stuff out. So I was just writing and writing and writing and writing. And, I never really knew what the next song was that was going to come out. But I told myself every month I was just going to release a song. And at the end of about 6-7 months, I would find another 3 or 4 songs, put it all together as a record, put it out. So Apologies was written. I honestly don't even remember when I wrote that song. I think it might have been 2 years ago, maybe at the beginning of when I quit the job and started doing this, or maybe a little before. It's just one of those songs where you're just sitting there one day and you're like, okay, this is going to be easy. And it just comes and it's just out. But what's funny is I didn't like the recording when I was like kind of taking a look at the last album. And I almost never go back and re-record songs. If I'm writing a song, it's happening right in the moment and I'm just running it down. But I knew with that song, it wasn't right. That's probably the first time I've ever gone back and done that. But I had to fight for that fucking song, man. I recorded it 3 times, which in the grand scheme of like what they used to do back in the day is like nothing. But for me, I might as well have scrapped that song, But I got hell bent on it and I was like, I have to record this song and I have to get it the way that I want it.
Did you have something in your mind as it's got to sound a certain way, but I'm just not quite getting it?
My biggest thing is in my lane right now, I'm only competing with myself. So Blood Love, I can hear how I sound like a little kid for the first time on Blood Love, even though I put that record out 2 years ago, but I hadn't been doing music every day at that point. So it was a fight to get what I got. at that point. Then I put out Feeler, which feels like a massive step up because I've been doing this every day for a year at that point. Now I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, all the things that I looked the other way on Feeler, where I might have been like, all right, it's not my favorite guitar tone, but it'll get the job done. I don't want to be doing that anymore. So I'm pushing myself on the engineering side really hard to get specifically guitar tones that I really, really like, or if I'm vocally, singing, like really trying to drive my performance. And I've found all these little ways in which you take the easy way out because you can, right? It's like in a full recording, you might not catch every little thing, and I know what I can get away with. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to know when I'm done with a song that it's the absolute best I could do. So that's what happened with Apologies. It was me fighting myself really, really hard for a long time, and it just felt like the right song to put out after Feeler to kind of set the tone for the next album, which I'm working on now.
So after I heard that single, I decided to deep dive a little more, and that's when I saw you've been out playing shows with Kelsey Carter and the Heroines, and I was like, yeah, this is such a small world. How did you and Kelsey get to know each other? Was it one of your videos which she'd seen?
Yeah, just TikTok. And what's really cool about the story with Kelsey is, it was like beginning stages for me. So I didn't really have much of a following, but the algorithm was starting to work in my favor. So slowly getting out there, and I don't remember what video it was on TikTok, and she just commented and said something like, man, I love this, and followed me. And that was it for a while. And then I think maybe 6-7 months later, her, agent messages me and just like, hey, we're just trying to put out feelers. Would you have any interest in touring? And I was like, of course, Then you wait another couple months to hear it again, and you're like, it's not going to happen. And then I finally got the offer to go out. So had to say yes, and I'm so glad that I did, because in this scene, it's hard to crack in when it comes to touring, because if you don't have an agent or a manager and you don't have any tour history, people don't really want to take a chance on you. They might not want to book you. And that's where I was at, So for her to just be like, I love this guy, I love the music, I want to bring him out on my headlining tour. And, with me not having any tour history for this project, that's a huge deal. So I thanked her way too many times, more than she probably wanted to hear, but I couldn't help it. I'll never forget that.
How was the whole tour? Did you get to visit new cities you'd never been to before?
Oh, of course. So with this project, I had just done a 4-date run about a month prior. So I did Georgia, 2 places in North Carolina, and then back to Richmond, Virginia. And I've been out on a tour before with my friends in a band called Sculpture Club, which you should check out if you don't know them. You'd like them.
Great name.
Oh, yeah. It's very indicative of that 80s post-punk. It's really great. But yeah, I played guitar in that band. So I did a month East Coast, Midwest with them. But yeah, on this tour, we got to go to cities I'd never been, states I'd never been. So ones I'd always wanted to go to, we got to go to Boston. We played Boston, which was probably the best turnout of the entire tour. It was super cool. And Chicago, Detroit. Yeah, so there was some really, really good shows. And for me, it was really cool because, when you build an online presence, and I've talked to so many people because I make that a point of why I exist on social media is to have the back and forth. So I know these people, that I don't even think of them as fans. I think of them as my friends online, and they came out and I got to meet so many people for the first time in the flesh and have those real conversations. That's the only reason I wanted to tour. I wouldn't do it if there weren't people there asking for it. I don't feel the need to be that guy. I just love writing songs,
That's an interesting take on it, because a lot of people say they write songs to play and do the live performance things. That's a totally different take on it.
I'm not your standard cup of tea, I guess. I just love writing songs. I always have. I like being in my own little world by myself. It's the only place where I feel like I'm just existing as I'm supposed to. So when you put me in all these other realms, you put me on a stage, it's I can do the job. I can show up and play the songs and have fun and put on a show, but I'd much rather just be writing songs. That's where I feel like my purpose is, you know what I mean? But then again, it's well, if you want to write songs forever, there's people out there who are helping you do that by being fans and listening and supporting you, and they want to see you live. So that's the only way I can give back and say thank you, is to go out and do that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that this first tour, it was a really good first tour out, and I'm just grateful for it.
I had Kelsey on the podcast sometime last year.
Oh, nice.
It was great to speak to her about her approach to social media. Whilst it's something that a lot of bands don't particularly like to do, it's become a necessity, really. And so she decided to rewire her approach to it and see it as her own TV channel and what would she like to put out there that she would enjoy. And I think that's a similar thing which you adopted with your videos of playing along to some of your favourite songs. Do you recall the first video of yours which like really gained a lot of traction?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. The Cure, Just Like Heaven. So the way that social media started for me, much like everyone, is like just your friends and your family following. That's great, but like they don't really care, right? Because it's like your friends and your family. So they're just like, oh, it's just Andrew in his studio doing what Andrew does, like whatever. But then I was talking to my dad and I was kind of saying, I'd put the record out. I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing anymore. How do you grow this like on social media or whatever? And, my dad just was kind of telling me at the end of his point, he just said something like any dad would, just being like, oh, well, just remember to have fun. And he was right. And I thought about that. And I just remember being like, well, when I was a kid, and this just only used to be fun because, right, there's no other rhyme or reason to why you do music. You're just a kid. You're just having fun. I used to just stand in front of the mirror for hours playing along to all my favorite bands. That's how it all started. So I just one day started setting up the iPhone on top of my couch, like literally placing it on the top of the couch. And I would just stand in the room, film myself playing like I normally do along to my favorite songs. And it started taking off. And then one day I just stood there and just played that riff to Just Like Heaven by The Cure. And it just went off.
That was TikTok.
That was on all three platforms. So YouTube, it went over 1 million. Instagram, it went to about 1 million. And on TikTok, it did about like 100,000, not quite as much, but it was the first real moment where I was like, whoa, this shit can happen.
How often was you checking and refreshing? Like, there's another few thousand right there.
Dude, yeah, I was like constantly trying to keep up because, like I said, it's like, if I was going to be on social media, I respond to everyone. So I had already made a point to do that. Well, when it starts taking off, you're like, oh man, I got to stay on this all the time. Otherwise, there's no way I'm going to keep up. Then I just kind of kept doing it. But yeah, it just kept taking off. I just had more fun with it. And much like you just said that Kelsey said, it's like I kind of recognized the things that I didn't like about social media that other artists were doing. And it felt disingenuous and it felt like
a chore. It's like, I don't want to be doing this part of the job.
And my thing is, like, when I started to do music and I left my job, it was like I was in the corporate world, so I was being told constantly how to be, who I am, and, jump. And all I ask is how high. Like that was like the world I was in. So when I left it, I was like, I'm not going to be fucked around by anyone other than me. So I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And I'm going to just be real about it. So I started treating social media like what I wanted it to be for me. And in doing that, it was really easy. It was like I was just having fun playing all these songs.
How weird's that? The thing that works out is the easiest thing.
And I think that's the thing, right? It's like a lot of people, they look at it like something they have to do rather than something that they can use for their own opportunity. And the amount of opportunity that has come to me in just 2 years, not even 2 years, of being on social media and utilizing it, it's like, it's just insane. So I've never seen it as a bad thing. Never. I just decided it was going to be a good thing and I was going to find my own way in it.
The playing along to the songs, it's such a cool idea, but I love the extra touches you put in there, which is like another thing that drew me in with like your little CRT TV playing the VHS tapes of the artists or the movies of the songs are from. Where do you find all the cool vintage items you have in your studio?
So when I was working the corporate world and I bought my house, I bought this house and it was in the middle of the woods and outside the city and a private community. I had a massive 2-car garage and that was becoming my studio. So I was like building it out, but high ceilings. So I had posters, but needed to continue to buy merch. And so I just wanted it to feel like the room I never had as a kid. I'd already been collecting like VHS, like campy 80s horror VHS, and I had the TV. And so there was nothing to do out there. And I was just so miserable working that job. So like any money I made extra, I just kept buying stuff. I just kept making that room feel, I guess, kind of like that little bedroom that I never had as a kid that I always wanted, just like a safe space, if you will. And fast forward to moving into the studio, I find, okay, you've actually got way too much stuff for the studio to hang up. You don't have the room for it all. But when you spend all of your time here, like I do, I mean, I'm quite literally here all of the time, every single day. These things are just here, like they're just a part of who I am. And so in all those ways, when you're playing along to a Cure song and you're like, oh, I'll just turn on the old school VHS TV, and I'll just put something in, and you kind of just figure things out and you start showing more and more of yourself the more you indulge into it. And that's what it's been.
So this studio you're in, this is in Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia, yeah. The Bakery Recording Studios is the name of the full place.
Is Virginia where you grew up, or is somewhere you moved later on?
Yeah, I'm from like right outside DC. There's a city called Alexandria. That's where I grew up. Fun fact, that's where Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters grew up. We went to the same high school. Obviously not at the same time, but got kicked out. Then I guess like not long after that went and did the whole Scream thing and then went on from there. So that's where I'm from. But yeah, I've been in Richmond for about 10 years now, other than like, buying the house and living outside of Richmond for a little bit. But I still worked in Richmond, still existed here. So this has become like my place now.
So is that your high school's claim to fame then, that Dave Grohl was there? Is there anything marking it there or anything like that?
They definitely tried to claim him after everything popped off. It's funny, I don't even think they knew about it when he was in Nirvana. I don't even think that even clocked. It wasn't until he became big with Foo Fighters. I don't know if they've like put anything up properly in the school. I haven't been back since then, but it was like after I'd even graduated that they caught on to it, which is just like funny. But yeah, it's true. He did. He went there and I guess he like flunked out or something like that. And not long after that, he took off.
If I'm right, you were born in like the early 90s.
92.
92. So you'd have been like coming of age as a teenager in what I consider this really weird time of the mid 2000s where music was just kind of like all over the place. But it seems it worked in your favor because you've become this like awesome mixing pot of influences, but particularly a lot of 80s stuff in there. Was 80s music something that surrounded you through your family, or was it just particularly radio stations, or what was it?
It's funny. When I was coming up, I only really had access to music in 2 to 3 ways that I can remember. One was firstly my dad. He was a musician, but he was basically only really showing me like the Beatles and like a weird band he loved called the Gypsy Kings, maybe some other stuff. But then I had the radio. So, there was like at that time where I grew up, it was like alternative radio, like rock radio. So it was all the 90s stuff. Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam. And I really didn't like any of that at the time. So I then had a high school friend when I was a kid named Paul. Now, Paul one day gave me a CD because he accidentally bought the edited version, and it was Blink-182. And so my youngest years were very much firstly like pop punk, that era of music coming up. Then I got into like all the classics like AC/DC, Metallica. I went that route. And it wasn't until honestly like a good bit later when I like probably heard The Cure on the radio where I finally started to understand, okay, wait a second. What are all these drum machines going on? And what are all those big reverb sounds? And so it was later in life. But like you said, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I mean, my walls are coated in nu metal posters too. So I went all those other routes first before finally arriving back at the 80s, and it's again that like first plant of when I was very, very young and hearing that first touch of it, but not being able to find it. Everybody wants to rule the world. When you finally find it again, you're like, holy shit, I found it. So I can't really pinpoint when it was that happened, but when it did, it shifted everything. That's when I really like figured out my music and my sound. And I mean, it just kicked the door wide open.
What was the first concert you went to?
It was Ringo Starr.
That's pretty cool.
Place called Wolf Trap in, I believe, Vienna, Virginia. So it's big outdoor amphitheater. My mom got my dad tickets for his birthday. So obviously it was like the whole family was going to go. We were kids, like we were so young. All I remember is like him playing Yellow Submarine. That's like the only song I knew of his that I remembered, but not a bad first show.
That's pretty cool. You mentioned earlier Torturetwinn. It's a fairly new music project. The album Blood Love released in 2025 with the latest album Feeler coming out earlier this year. You've openly spoken, you mentioned it earlier, about quitting your full-time, pretty well-paid job back in September 2024. You had the house, everything was going great, but you put it all on the line to make music full-time. What was that incentive to do that, the moment where you felt the time was right? Because that's a very scary and daunting thing to do, but you pushed through.
Well, it was honestly a combination of a lot of really good and bad things happening at the same time. You know, working in the corporate world and working for a boss who is kind of a nightmare, you get pushed to such a limit. And I'm a pretty like easygoing guy. You know, I can get along with anyone, but I was also going through recovery at the time. So for quitting drinking, like I was finally getting into like the program for the first time and like really trying to like find myself again and like feel good about my life. So all these things were kind of happening. You know, I was in a bad relationship where I couldn't help my partner anymore, you know, and it was just like I was honestly at the end of my rope. And I had what felt like everything you're supposed to have, you know, according to like the normal walk of life. And I was miserable. And so I don't know where I've picked this up, but I've somehow came across this book that was called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And I guess I was just like at a place where I was like, well, maybe a book will help, you know, like maybe a book will do some sort of good. And it changed my life. I mean, it just, the way that that guy had written in that book felt like he was speaking to exactly where I was at that time. And it was the simplest things, like simplest ideas. Like if you're not getting after it right now musically, someone else is. There's all these ideas existing and they're all out there. But if you're not actively there, putting yourself there every day, you're missing opportunities. And it was perfectly in line with what I was learning in recovery, which is like, yo, man, it's just for today. It's all just for today. Tomorrow may not even happen. The past is gone. Yesterday's gone. Just make today count. And enough things finally transpired to where I was like, I am going to sell my house. I just decided I'm going to sell it and I'm going to move back to Richmond, get a shitty little apartment. This studio just happened to open up at the time when I asked if there was a room available. There was one room available and I got it immediately. And then from there, it was a matter of just getting ready to quit the job. And then long story short, one day I walked in on a Monday and I had finally been fucked off enough by my boss. And I just basically gave it back to him and said, I'm out.
So no notice or anything. You literally walked out.
Walked out. Yeah, I had to. I've never done that before in my life. I don't believe in burning bridges, but with that guy and that job, I just said enough is enough and walked out, never looked back. And literally since that day, everything has just worked out. And I was talking to my partner about this last night and I was saying, how lucky am I to say that after almost 2 years, I haven't had a bad day. Like I haven't had a bad day since that day. So it's pretty wild when you just actually finally start to believe in like yourself and what your life is supposed to be and your purpose. And I'm lucky to know like I love music and I didn't need to know anything else. But the minute I did that, man, it's like it all just started working out.
How did you sleep that first night?
I don't think I had smiled and really meant it in a long time until that day. So yeah, I slept very well that night. And it just got better. I mean, I could go on forever about all the things that kept transpiring immediately after I walked out of that job. It was just like opportunity after opportunity or like bumping into all the right people and friends. And like, it was just, I knew immediately the universe was like, dude, you made the right decision and we're going to show you just how right of a decision you made.
You said like the amount of growth you saw in that first year from going in full time was like, that amazed you as well.
Sure.
Just came on leaps and bounds straight away.
The important part about that too, which is this is something that I talk about a lot in like the recovery rooms. There's this mantra that I picked up and I can never remember exactly if I got it from that book, that War of Art book, or if I just kind of like put things together along the way. So I hope I'm not plagiarizing it, but there's this mantra that I started to speak in my life. And it was your thoughts become your beliefs become your actions become your routine, and your routine becomes your life. So the likelihood of me having forward progression and success in the music industry simply because I chose to do it every single day, that likelihood was so much greater than it was 2 years ago when I was just kind of fiddling around, throwing a song out every now and again. So it's like, it's as much deliberately going at this and deciding that there is nothing else that I'm going to do and believing in that, mixed with the fact that like, dude, if you're just doing this every day and you're putting out music all the time, how much more likely are you for someone to hear it and for things to transpire? So that's kind of how I look at it now when I talk to people. I'm like, people talk to me all the time being like, how does it happen? And I used to be that guy watching all the documentaries and reading all the books about like, how did an artist make it in? And there is no one way. It's just that they didn't stop. they refused to do anything else. And when you finally accept that fact and go at it hard, I can't even tell you about the things that have happened to me in 2 years that I just would have never happened otherwise if I just didn't go at it every day.
Your song Butterflies, I think, is the one that talks all about all of this and
100%.
finding out what you should be doing in life. You say, when I die, don't cry, live my life just how I felt right.
Yeah.
How soon after leaving your job and going fully into music did that song come about?
Not long, man, not long. Butterflies was, I believe, the third song I put out for Feeler. So it was like Blood Love had come out. I had done Blood Love while I was still working at that job, commuting back and forth to the studio and whatever. But Butterflies was like one of those songs where it was so fresh on my mind and I'd been talking about it so much. And it's funny, that song happened because my studio mate, Jacob, he had an old Telecaster, like an old telly that was his like childhood guitar sitting in the closet down the hall. And he was like, yeah, man, you can just like borrow it if you want. And the first day that I was ripping on here, I wrote that opening lead, that running down lead, and the song just took me and I just ran it down. And I remember just sitting there being like, how do you write a song about what will probably be the most important decision you ever made in the rest of your life, but then also make it so universal for anybody else out there who's stuck in their way, whether it's a relationship, a job, whatever it is, addiction. How do you give them that big, crescendo moment in a song where they can be like, when I die, I want to know that like I did everything I was supposed to do and everyone can be happy with the fact that I'm gone now. So that song, it came easy, but I also I remember working for it lyrically because I really wanted to give myself and people something to remember.
I need to ask,
yeah,
the poster that's over your right shoulder, the Winger poster.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, you really embrace like the late 80s, early 90s hard rock.
Oh, man, I love them. I've got much like the Winger poster, I've got a Skid Row one. I'll tilt it up, see if you can see it up there.
Nice.
So I've got a Skid Row one all the way up there. It's another door-length poster. I love it. I love 80s hard rock.
You've done videos with songs from Rat, LA Guns, Cinderella, Skid Row, just to name but a few. I love how open you are with that style of music being part of yours too. Where does that come from? Just radio? Because that kind of music, that's what made me want to be in a band when I was a kid.
Oh, hell yeah.
So where does that love of influence come for you?
Well, Van Halen was the first one. My friend's dad, when I was a kid, it was a Halloween party. He came down with the old booklet of CDs he had in his car. He's like, literally a booklet. I haven't heard any of that stuff before. I was like 10. And Van Halen, he put on the compilation CD, the first compilation, Eruption into Ain't Talking About Love. That moment to me,
what is this?
I'll remember that forever. I mean, you find all the common ones, like you find Def Leppard and you find all the other ones like in that mainstream pocket. But when I got older, you start to hear about that culture that existed. And I was very driven towards that culture of like 80s Sunset Strip in LA in that time period. I loved the style. And so I started to deep dive, and really just go in as hard as I could and find. And it's easy to do now because obviously like on Spotify, you could go forever. But I remember days where I'd be sat over at Wax Moon Records, my buddy's record store down the street, and he would have, a collection of all these glam rock or hard rock, whatever. And I put them on and then you search this one band and you're like, oh, there's another band. And it was very incestuous too. So yeah, I went in really, really deep. I started to do it about a year ago. So there's some songs on Feeler that are very indicative of that time period because I was playing it so much. And yeah, I wasn't really allowed to listen to it growing up, like I wasn't like allowed to have those kinds of CDs or anything like that. So I found my way back to it, later down the line. But man, that era of music, just those chuggy riffs that stay on that like E string, that open E, and they just stay chug, like LA Guns all day. And I've actually, oddly enough, just from playing those kinds of songs, all the dudes in LA Guns, like I've gotten to like talk to them now, and because they've just been like, yo, we love like what you're doing, and they're out there ripping still. I just got to see them like a month ago in Virginia, and they're just the coolest people, like they got to literally live in an era which some of us have just dreamed about, and they got to do it firsthand, so I love all of them.
With your stuff, Pretty When You Cry has that cool Hysteria, Def Leppard thing going off. And you mentioned there's like the Van Halen style riff in Heaven, which you speak about in one of your videos. But it all still works with your style. It blends that new wave and Tom Petty elements. It's kind of everything I really fell into love with music. I was always into music during the 80s, but when I turned like 16, 17, around the early 90s, that's when I like deep dived. And all my favorite bands got killed off when grunge came in. So I kind of started leaning more towards like Tom Petty, Gin Blossoms, all the really melodic kind of stuff that came out. So all the stuff you do is kind of like everything I love in one pot. I love it. It's great. I can imagine your music being something John Hughes would have enjoyed and perhaps put into one of his movies had he still been here making films.
I think a lot of us in this resurgence, this 80s resurgence, there's a lot of bands that I was looking up to over the last 10 years that have been doing this, this whole post-punk and synth pop like resurgence. And I think all of us were, The Breakfast Club, let's be honest, that movie, for probably the bulk of us who are in music, there was some influence that like John Bender, at least for me, had, like I'm literally wearing the denim vest here, it's like John Hughes and those Brat Pack movies for me growing up were like the coolest thing ever, whether it was the soundtracks or just the dialogue and the style. I'll keep Breakfast Club playing. I'll keep it on my TV. Like I'll put the tape in and I'll keep it on, sometimes while I'm like writing and like keeping that in the back of my head. Cause I always feel like I'm trying to write for something bigger than just me in the moment, right? Like, so I always try and picture stuff, whether it's like on Butterflies, when I was writing that song, it was a very emotional song to write because I kept thinking about how would it be if I was on like the biggest stage imaginable playing this song, or if it was at the end of a movie where like The Breakfast Club, where everything works out and everybody finds love and finds purpose. So you start to channel those things that you consume throughout your life. And yeah, I love John Hughes. I'm pretty sure I've never heard of anyone saying they didn't love The Breakfast Club. And if they did, then something wrong with them.
Right. Speaking of 80s movies and all 80s movie soundtracks and stuff, I want you to time travel to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s and you're heading to the video store. What movie soundtrack do you have on your Walkman and what 3 movies are you going to rent for the weekend?
Man, it's so funny. Like the more I started to dive into like the 80s and the culture and the music, you start to realize that even your favorite artists like Tom Petty had 80s moments, right? Like they all indulged into those sounds. Bruce Springsteen, they all did it. So it's such a loaded question. But for me, if I was walking, because I grew up going to like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video as a kid. That's what we had here to rent, VHS and stuff. So if it was me at that time in the 80s, just knowing how obsessed I am with Tom Petty, that one 80s record that he put out, Long After Dark, I think that was the first record he put out in the 80s. And it's like no one ever really talked about it till like the last 2 years. There was a whole documentary and behind the scenes that they had shot during the making of that album. And for some reason, no one ever talked about that album. And it's got some of the coolest 80s sounds, just like pop rock stuff going on. I literally have Deliver Me tattooed on my stomach, which is one of the songs from that album. So I feel like I would have found that album and been like, this is the coolest guy ever. And I would probably listen to it on repeat, much like I've done, since I found him. So I'd probably be listening to that. And then, if I'm picking up movies, obviously, if The Breakfast Club had been out, which I don't remember what year it came out, but that would have been an obvious grab, then I'd probably go into like the 80s campy horror stuff because that's just like another realm of my room. And I love it. So one of my favorite movies is a movie called American Werewolf in London.
Probably one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
Undoubtedly. And I'm obsessed with that movie. Actually, one of my early songs for Torturetwinn that I wrote, it's called Killing You Tastes So Good, KYTSG. That song I wrote because of that movie. So like if you listen to the lyrics, you could put it together. It's like about a man turning into a werewolf and hunting his prey at night, but also like finding love in all of that too. So that movie, 100%. The other one I would probably say, which was like, I was trying to think back to like my childhood, think about like what movies do I remember seeing on like the TV or like movies that I could resonate with like when I was a kid, even though they were from such a different era. And that movie, did you ever see that movie Stand By Me?
It's one of the all-time greats, man.
Yeah. I remember watching that as a boy and being like, this movie will make sense hopefully forever. because it's just such a perfect example of like young boys just being young boys, but then also mixing in all of the like heavier shit that kids go through, but still making it just like a movie about boys in the summer. You know what I mean? Like, it's that movie to me when I was a kid. I mean, I remember having those moments with like my guys, like, you know, where we would go deep into the woods and running down creeks just to see how far we could go and find our way back. It's a perfect movie. So I feel like those three movies pretty much summarize me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good pizza night right there.
Oh, yeah.
They're like movies for life right there.
Easy. Like, you could also take those to, you know, if you got stuck on an island, that kind of question, like, you know, take those three to an island, watch them forever and be good.
How old was you when you first saw American Werewolf in London?
Later. So weird childhood, man. Wasn't really allowed to watch horror or anything like that, you know, to a certain degree. So I didn't really get into any of the, like, I remember we'd go to the video store and, you know, that they'd have like the promotional cardboard cutouts of like Freddy Krueger for Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'd be like, can we rent that? My mom like, we're not watching that. So I didn't get into the campy horror until my later 20s. You know, I started being like, oh, I can go down this rabbit hole now. And American Werewolf was like a deeper find. It wasn't one of the first finds for me. You know, I went all the obvious ones first and then stumbled across that one day and just was like, this is the greatest film that's ever been made.
I'm different to you then, because I was born in 74. So like when it came to the early 80s, all those big horror films were coming out and I was allowed to watch all those movies. But the weird thing is I could watch the most horrible decapitations or anything. As soon as boobs came on the screen, it was like, close your eyes.
Yeah. I had that too. I specifically remember renting Hollow Man with Kevin Bacon.
Love that film.
Yeah, great film. But I remember there was a scene where it was like boobs were coming on the screen. I remember mom being like, cover your eyes. And I'm like peeking through my hand trying to see. Yeah, it's funny.
Speaking of like movie soundtracks and things like that, have you ever thought of like releasing instrumental versions of your songs?
Yeah.
I love how you do like all the layers with the guitars and you do little videos showing how it builds up, but that's just lovely pieces of music.
Yeah, actually, I feel like I've had a couple people make comments being like, when are you going to just put out like the guitar music album, you know, like just the instrumental kind of stuff. And especially on songs like Heaven, you know, because that song, you could just listen to it and it just drives and, you know, you could just throw it on and go down the highway. Like, that's the other like realm I'm always writing for, which is like windows down, driving down the highway, volume all the way up, you know? So Remember Me could work for that too. So yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I'll just put out like a instrumental version of all those songs, just pulling the lyrics out and stuff. But there is some part of me that's been thinking about in spare time in between writing like the next album, because I've got riffs for days. You know, I can write a riff and sometimes they go nowhere. And it's funny, it happened the other day. I got a comment on an old video. And it was just me like recording one day. It was like, you know, one of those studio videos where I'm just like, oh, I'll put it up, you know, because it's like part of the process of me being on social media. Somebody commented and was like, yo, man, like, when's this song coming out? And I literally didn't even remember the riff. It's from like over a year ago, you know, and I was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what this is, you know, like, so some part of me was thinking like, it'd be no problem to just like track out instrumental, like guitar driven music, especially if it's like more hard rock, glam, like metal stuff like that. So maybe I'll do that for fun, just in between, you know.
Love it. Awesome. Well, I look forward to whatever you do next. Appreciate you spending some time chatting with me. I really enjoyed that. That's great.
Yeah, likewise, dude. It's been so nice. You know, every time anybody reaches out, I always say yes. And I think it's just because in these early days and early stages of all this forming, you know, I've been lucky to find people that I feel like we're just on the same path, you know, and music's obviously like the constant. It's the staple in all of this. But every time I talk to people, you know, like we've not even talked before, but it feels like we've talked a million times before. And I love that. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad you reached out and I'm very much looking forward to whenever we talk the next time, wherever we're both at in our lives.
Big shout out and thank you to Torturetwinn's Andrew Devin for joining me on today's Straight to Video podcast. That was a really cool and fun conversation and only made me a bigger fan of him, and hopefully it inspired you all to have a listen to his music too. Please let me know what you think and drop a comment on any of his social media to let him know you first heard about him on this show. Torturetwinn have a brand new single released on the 27th of July called Walk, but keep up to date on everything that's happening as he's putting out cool posts pretty much every day by searching Torturetwinn with a double N on any social media or hit up torturetwinn.com. So over at our 80s video shop in Alverton, Derbyshire, which is just 10 minutes from junction 28 of the M1, I want to let you all know that our 4th birthday event is coming up on Saturday the 18th of July. We have a special guest, Simon Williamson, who performed as Max Rebo in the Star Wars movie Return of the Jedi, and we're also going to be joined by the fantastic illustrator and poet Chris White, who we're big fans of too, so it's going to be a really fun afternoon from midday until 4pm, so I hope you'll all be able to join us. To stay up to date on these and other events, then please follow us on whatever social media platform you choose, simply at 80s Video Shop, but of course you can come visit us at the weekends when we're open Saturdays and Sundays from 11 till 3pm. So that is all for this episode of the podcast. So until next time, make sure to always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.